Hello and welcome to 3 Minute Gaming, I'm Nathan, and today we're talking about Vampire Survivors, the bane of my Steam discovery queue and wallet. It seems everybody's flipping assets and tossing a Survivor-style game on Steam, but are there any good ones? Is it worth surviving? Well, I've lost my mind and thrown my 3-minute video format into the trash, as today we are going to cover 10 Survivor-style games, with 10 more in a future video, so keep an eye out for that. Before we dive in, I'll define a Survivor-style game. It's usually a game that either has auto-firing or dual-stick shooting against waves of enemies with the goal to survive until time runs out. Often you get a wide arsenal of weapons and passives to augment them, with the primary gameplay being simple movement paired with trying to create an optimal build. But I'm already bored of this intro, so let's get to surviving. Here are 10 Vampire Survivors games from my backlog, reviewed in rapid succession. God help us all. Metal Gear Survive is a... No, we ain't touching that. 20 Minutes Till Dawn is a survivor's game that's a dual-stick shooter rather than auto-fire, with a very heavy emphasis on elemental synergies and using the right character and weapon combinations. You choose from a selection of vastly different characters and compare them with a bunch of weapons, tossing in some base passives, and you're off. Each character also has 3 unique passives she can get by killing bosses that further augments your character. This one is pretty challenging, but once you get the hang of its synergies, it's really well done, paired with this minimalistic color palette and interesting unlocks. The bottom line is 20 Minutes Till Dawn is one of the better games on this list and one I reviewed before. Since that review, they've add even more stuff that has made this game even better. So if you enjoy challenging dual-stick shooters and love making broken builds, check this one out. Army of Ruin is a survivor's game by the guys that made Ziggurat, which I didn't know until I was writing this review. So it has a higher production values that definitely show through with its excellent cartoony visuals. Aside from that, this one unfortunately is pretty bog standard with only a few minor twists. The first one being you can upgrade the number of weapon and passive slots using persistent currency. And second, that weapon evolution is paired on getting combination of elements through various different passives rather than it being tied to one specific passive exactly. The game also has a lot of stage-specific challenges to do as you unlock stars, achievements, and more money, which gives you a lot to work for and help guide gameplay. The bottom line is Army of Ruin is okay. It didn't really blow my mind, and while its visuals are very nice, it doesn't do what I'm kind of looking for in these games nowadays, which is take the Vampire Survivors formula and kind of up the ante a bit. However, if you like these kind of bog-standard survival games, this one has a lot of polish and a great studio behind it. Arrival Zero Earth is certainly the most, let's say, premise-rich on this list, as the plot is aliens are invading 1990s Finland, and you need to assemble an army to welcome these War of the Worlds bozos to Earth, Will Smith style. Rather than collecting weapons, you instead amass troops into a horde, each with different weapon types ranging from guns, wizards with lightning, and Finnish mages that summon electric telephone poles from orbit. Yes, really, there's so much about Finland I apparently didn't know about, but I'm learning a lot from this game. The trick is that each of your squad is a certain number of units, and they can be killed, which diminishes their efficiency. As your squads fight, they rank up, and higher ranking squads can be merged into more powerful super squads, meaning you are constantly progressing your horde while playing. It's also less survival and more roguelike as you clear maps to progress rather than survive a set amount of time. The bottom line is that Arrival Zero Earth is one of the most unique games on this list, and honestly probably more roguelike than Survivors, but it has autofire, so I'm counting it. My only real gripe is I wish the bosses, or rather boss, was a little less bullet spongy, but it does make for a good ending challenge. If you like auto battlers mixed with Survivor games and roguelikes, as well as enjoy the great country of Finland, this one's right up your alley. Beautiful Mystic Survivors is, well, I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's horny Vampire Survivors. Very horny Vampire Survivors. The core gameplay here is pretty solid clone of VS, except this time you're playing as some scantily clad anime waifu with impressively large, back pain. This game is full 3D, and the, art assets are nice, if that is your style. The game does have some interesting weapon evolution ideas, where weapons have multiple evolutions to choose from, and the characters have fairly unique passives as well as a special ability they can activate, which does make this a little more interesting than a normal VS game. The bottom line is that Beautiful Mystic Survivors is basically an okay Vampire Survivors clone that's leaning heavily in its sex appeal to sell copies, and for me personally, that didn't really land, but I still had some fun with it. And I cannot believe I'm mentioning this, but if I don't, someone will say so in the comments. This version is PG-13, but I do apparently sell a sexy Mystic Survivors version, which is the exact same game, just with more, non-survival related material. Do with that information as you will. Boneraiser Minions is a different type of Survivors game, where instead of getting weapons, you're instead raising, upgrading, and fusing different types of invincible zombie minions. While only you can take damage, your minions need to be diversified and upgraded appropriately in order to stave off the incoming invasion, as different types of Bone Raisers mean a diversity of playstyles. Another really cool mechanic is you can actually pay persistent upgrade points to add more waves to a run, giving you more opportunities to build up your horde before the final boss, though it does make the game harder. The bottom line is that Boneraiser Minions is a really clever variant of this type of game that uses the foundation to do something different, which I enjoyed quite a bit. I liked this game enough that I even gave it a full review, which you can click through here. It's also worth mentioning that devs are very active in providing frequent updates and new content to this game, meaning you'll have a lot of fun should this be your jam. Bounty of One is a fairly basic Survivors game that has one big twist: local co-op. The gameplay itself is fairly stripped down when compared to other Survivors games. While you do have multiple characters with unique weapons and abilities, they each only have one weapon and they cannot add more. Upgrades also are pretty basic. Nothing super crazy here, just stuff like faster attack speed, more damage, piercing, things like that. And on top of that, there's currently really only one map, though there are 3 modes to play it on. However, the interesting thing is you can get 4 controllers plugged in and play it with 4 people in co-op, which makes the game considerably more fun. And the bottom line is just that. The co-op is the main draw with this one. I will keep repeating it because it is true. I will say that having played it in both co-op and single player, the single player definitely feels very lacking, but the co-op is pretty engaging, especially since you have to decide how to divvy up upgrades every time, as well as potentially spend level up upgrades to revive dead players. It being local only was a bit of a bummer. I wish I could play this one online, but if you have some buddies that can sit around your computer monitor that all love Survivors games, maybe give this one a look. While on the surface Brotato is technically a Survivors game, I found it more to be in line with a game like Geometry Wars, in terms of its high difficulty, lack of persistent upgrades, and heavy emphasis on stat manipulation. This game is wave-based, and after each wave, you will be given the opportunity to upgrade your Brotato, both with level ups as well as either passives or a weapon for one of usually 6 weapon slots. The trick is every character's method of stat game and weapon usage varies significantly, meaning builds will also vary significantly if you're going to survive. Given the game has an absolutely insane amount of characters and weapons, you're going to need to learn to master which stats to raise and which to sacrifice based on your character, and since there are no persistent upgrades as mentioned like in most roguelikes, you either get good or you die. The bottom line is Brotato is actually one of my favorites on this list because of the lack of persistent upgrades. This makes everyone fairly challenging, and the high number of characters allows for a massive amount of play diversity. My only real issue is that I think the final boss is a little cheap. Getting one shot after a 20-minute run and not really unlocking anything because there's a lack of persistent upgrades, although you can unlock new guns and stuff, is a bit of a bummer, but this is a game for burly, tough, adult, potatoes. Crimsonland is actually a fairly old game that was originally a Flash game and was later made as kind of a deluxe version on consoles and PC. And as such, it definitely predates the Survivors label, but I thought I'd mash it in anyway, so more people would revisit it, and because it is extremely fun. Essentially, you get one weapon and a whole host of upgrades, and killing enemies drops power-ups amongst other things, making this more Geometry Wars-esque than Vampire Survivors, though it is wave-based. It also additionally has a campaign that has a variety of levels that helps unlock new weapons, as well as teach you new mechanics, which is pretty great as well. The bottom line is Crimsonland was certainly an inspiration for a lot of modern-day dual-stick shooters / survival roguelike games, and as a potential granddaddy, it still holds up quite well. Added bonus is this one is available on consoles should you be that kind of person. I've mentioned Geometry Wars a lot in this video, and of all the games I'm covering, this one certainly looks the most like it. Galaxy Survivors is a dual-stick shooter with plenty of Survivor-style elements, including auto-firing, multiple weapons, and a ton of passes, but with some interesting twists. First is you can only select one weapon at a time to fire at full speed, the rest fire at a slight delay, and additionally your main goal is actually to visit different planets and save them, which usually involves just killing a bunch of enemies, which grants you more powers and upgrades but also increases the threat, making the wave harder. It's a cool idea, one that kind of lets you build your own difficulty based on the difficulty of the planets you wish to save, with more risk leading to higher reward. The bottom line is that Galaxy Survivors is a cute game where I can't see where I'm going half the time because it's like an entire children's book on shapes, has had a seizure, and is also exploding simultaneously. It's a neat variation on the concept, and the devs keep adding stuff to it, and I also have a full review of this one, so maybe check that and this one out. The last one for today is going to be Gunlocked, which is probably the most unique game on this list, as instead of being a traditional Survivors game, it's actually a space shmup with Survivors elements. All of your weapons auto-fire Survivor style, as well as you get a limited number of them, as well as a limited number of passives that have synergies and blah blah blah. But the main gist is that it's a bullet hell-esque space shooter. Well, honestly, less bullet hell and more retro. Think like Life Force or Gradius on the NES rather than, say, a Toho game or something. Weirdly enough, the combo Survivors meets shmup works really well together, like peanut butter and chocolate, and adds just enough of a skill requirement to the fun build synergy of a Survivors game to make Gunlocked incredibly engaging. The bottom line is Gunlocked is exactly the kind of evolution I want to see within the rise of these Survivor-style games, taking the fundamental foundation and expanding it to other genres in interesting ways. This is another one where I have a full review on the channel, so check that out if you want more detail, but the general gist is it is a fantastic challenge mixed with some great power fantasy stuff, and is absolutely worth buying. So that's it for the first 10, expect 10 more very soon, but of this particular list, I'm going to say my top 3 are probably Gunlocked, Brotato, and 20 Minutes Till Dawn, with Boneraiser Minions getting a strong honorable mention, and Beautiful Mystic Survivors getting the horny bonk hammer. There will be more coming very shortly, so if you enjoy Survivors games, be sure to stay tuned to the channel, and as I mentioned, some of these has full reviews, which I will put in the description. I'm curious to know if you've played any of these games and which of them is your favorite, so please be sure to let me know in the comments, and we can have a fight over which of these is king of the Survivors Hill. Regardless, thank you so much for watching, and have a great time out there surviving.